I love it. Chris, thank you, sir, for taking a minute out today. I appreciate it.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me.
You bet. So let's begin our journey here. Officially today, 5 years ago, we were right in the middle or getting ready to head into this pandemic.
Yeah,
So, how much of living through that has affected your work and the way that you live life today?
it's a great question. I fundamentally it shifted a lot of stuff for me,
Yeah.
right? So I had just stopped, like my role had changed at Impact. I was the chief operating officer up until right around the change of the new year.
Yeah.
And so I was doing more of an internal coaching piece, but we were still going to the office a ton. We had this we were literally 6 months into this beautiful new office space. For about half the company, the other half was remote. But then when all the COVID lockdowns happened, it was right before we were supposed to have a big event in Hartford. So we had to figure out how to do that virtually.
Yeah.
And then we all went home. And so as you see me in my home office, this is because of COVID.
Yeah.
And so through that, the economy shifts, things are going on. While I was at Impact, I like built this program with the CEO, Bob Ruffalo, and one of the partners in the company, Marcus Sheridan. We built this coaching program and I went to go be the head coach for. And then I started just working out of this space as a coach, which has then put me into being nothing, or not nothing but now I'm a speaker and a coach.
Yeah.
I'm on my way out of my time at Impact and am now a partner at the Question First group, which is something that three of us, or excuse me, four of us co-founded and have started coming out of all the lessons learned from COVID. And
Yeah, for sure.
yeah,
Well, when you look on paper, there's a lot going on. But if we needed to boil this down to something that would be totally understandable, I'm going to put you in front of a bunch of grade school kids. They're fifth graders. It's career day. And the kid in the back of the room that's curious is like, hey, what do you do for a living? How do you answer them?
yeah, I help leaders and salespeople have better conversations.
Okay, which is essential. So, what did you want to be in the fifth grade? What was your dream life?
You know, fifth grade, I was probably like really into watching the show Jag with my parents. So I was like, I'm gonna be a military lawyer at that point, potentially. As I got a little bit older, I said that I really want to be an infantry officer in the Army.
So, what were these foundational elements? Take me back to your childhood. What was woven into you to
Yeah.
get on this path of helping the sales world and the leaders? How did it happen?
Yeah. So I'm incredibly lucky, and it's also really sort of crazy. So I ended up, so I'll go back to when I was young. My dad wanted to be a military officer. He had a bunch of health things that happened. He never did it.
Yeah.
I didn't want to do the military thing until about this time where I remember being in Washington, D.C., looking at the changing of the guard at the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier. And I was just like I'm like 13 and I'm like overwhelmed, right?
Yeah.
And I said, that's what I'm going to do. Now, granted, I was never tall enough to be in the honor guard. But from that point, I knew I wanted to go be a military officer.
Yeah.
So I did that, commanded a company in the 82nd Airborne Division, saw the good and bad sides of leadership. And then in 2014, I went into the business world. Had a job that I did not like coming out of the Army, went to grad school, did a graduate degree in organizational leadership, did worked at an architecture firms like director of ops, helped build with the owner, helped build the team. And then I went to this company, Impact, and I started coaching and training the leadership team. And I started coaching and training in marketing and sales. And today I'm just lucky enough that this is all I get to do now, right? Or like this
Yeah.
is the thing that I do because Joe, there's a huge problem in both those two professions right now.
Yeah.
And they stem from really the same thing, which is a lack of an actual development program for both.
Yeah. So when did you know this was the right path for you to help people? Was there a client? Was there a moment?
I think I think if I had to go back, like when did it become like what my why was?
Yeah.
It was probably as I was getting out of the army. I read Simon Sinek's book, and I really dove into like what is the driving factor? What are the things that I loved about being an army officer versus the things that I didn't? And what I always came back to, I loved helping develop junior officers and soldiers.
Yeah.
So when I was a company commander, my favorite thing was helping mold the platoon leaders that I had,
Yeah.
right? And that it was just a passion, it was a fire in my belly. And so as I got into these jobs, I was like, that's the thing. And then now, there's something about experiencing a win for yourself, which is fun.
Yeah.
But I was on a call yesterday with the chief revenue officer who's telling me the story of how we did all this training. They watched a sales call together as a team, had some thoughts. I watched it. We redid a training on it. Sales rep took the training, took everything we discussed, and is about to close this huge deal because of everything. And I was like shaken up, right? Because it's like we're having an impact.
Yeah.
Um, or when you get like an email from a young leader that struggled picking up what we teach, that was then like, hey man, the burden of leadership was huge before. Now it feels so much lighter
Yeah.
because I can communicate. Like that's like reinforced the thinking probably back from 2013, 2014 of why is this the thing that I do?
Yeah. So when you look at the history of the American military,
Hmm.
who do you think was the best leader? Who do you think was the one that embodied everything that you find leadership should embody?
So I'm going to give you an answer that only a handful of paratroopers are going to know, right? But it's, Adam Barlow's a colonel today. He was he was my first boss in the 82nd Airborne Division. He was a plans officer. He had been a two-time company commander in the 82nd. He was the aide de camp to All American 6, the commanding general of the 82nd Airborne Division. And he was my mentor. And he pushed me super hard, but he also genuinely cared about my development and my growth.
Yeah.
He went on, when I was in command, he became the operations officer in the battalion I was in. He went on to be the brigade operations officer. He commanded an airborne infantry battalion up in Alaska. And now I believe he's at the Pentagon. But Adam's core belief was like, we have to be varsity. We can't be JV.
Yeah.
And he taught me everything that it meant to be a paratrooper in the 82nd Airborne Division.
Wow.
And that like has tied in with me through everything. Like upstanding, moral compass, ethical dude. And I spent more time with him than probably anybody else I've ever worked with because we were deployed together to Afghanistan. But he's my go-to when I think about what's right in the military.
So when I haven't been in the military. My dad was in the Air Force for a little while, which
Mm-hmm.
is why I'm in Kansas City. He was born in Brooklyn, raised in Long Island, wanted to see the world, went to Richards Gower, got stationed, fell in love, boom, here we are.
Yep.
But there's all of these myths, because I remember when I was growing up, I was a little freaked out by the military about the
Mm.
possibility of everything ending that fast.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's
Yeah.
we wrestle with mortality our whole lives.
Yeah.
But that was definitely a misconception. There were so many things that would be positive, and that's a myth. I mean, it's a reality, but it's a myth. So, in all of the years that you've been in the military, which has obviously groomed you for business and to excel in life, What was the one myth that you had about the military that you totally figured out was not real and there was a truth that was bigger?
That you like rank doesn't mean you just get to tell people what to do, right? And you could see leaders that did not understand that truth. That those are your screamers and yellers, and you got sort of compliance out of folks from that.
Yeah,
But I learned, and again, this is something that Adam really showed me, was you have to delegate, you have to explain why you need certain things and how it all works. And you need to get people that are committed to doing the thing,
yeah,
not just, it can't just be the stick. And, the best leaders that I had in the Army were all, and I was an infantry officer. And so when I say dudes, there were no women in the infantry when I was an infantry officer.
yeah,
So the best dudes I saw were these guys that listened, they asked questions, they weren't the loudest person in the room, but when they spoke, everybody listened and everybody understood why we were doing things.
yeah,
And the dudes that struggled were loud, and you never really understood, why are we doing this? Even if they had great intentions, they just never were able to articulate it, and they struggled. I mean, have you read General McChrystal's book, Team of Teams?
no, I've heard about it.
Okay. So General McChrystal, awesome, right?
Yeah,
Talks about everything they did in Iraq and Afghanistan with Joint Special Operations, like all this stuff. And I had a battalion commander who worked on that staff,
wow,
and he tried to implement the same things, but he never articulated the why and why it was important, never tied it to his experience, like just said, this is what we're going to do. And I understood him because we had a human to human personal relationship, but his company commanders didn't. And so he was less effective because he didn't know how to communicate it to him, didn't know how to get the why. And it took me years to understand this. After I read Team of Teams, I was like, holy smokes,
yeah.
this is what he was trying to do, but he couldn't talk about it. And so he had a mediocre command at best when he could have potentially been one of the best.
Yeah. You know what's interesting about that? Before the Chiefs became a dynasty,
Hmm.
and this was way, way back in the 90s, they wanted to implement the whole idea of what the Patriots were doing.
Hmm.
They came in, they hired an old GM from there. They had kind of this playbook, and it just failed. It was a blimp that was destined to explode. And I think about that, about people that just implement this template that worked. But it's interesting about the people that you talk about that yell. Everybody, I was thinking about all the people that I've known in life that have done that. They were totally ineffectual. No one really listened. And it's like the whispers are the ones that you want to listen to,
Yeah.
you
Well,
know?
because they're the ones that know that they don't have to be the loudest in the room to make change happen.
Yeah.
And that's I think a huge misconception for a lot of young leaders that don't get trained, is they think they just have to tell people everything and do everything,
Yep.
when that is probably the most ineffective path for somebody.
Too much noise. So let's segue into business. If
Yeah.
you could meet one magnanimous business mind right now that's a true leader that embodies the principles you teach to clients, who would you love to meet, talk to, someone that might help you on your path?
It's another great question. Um, I think there's two that come to mind. Um, one one is more because he is a more detail oriented human, and that's Tim Cook. Like,
Yeah,
I think that, if Steve Jobs were still alive, he'd be my number one.
yeah,
But I think Tim Cook has done amazing things, and has had the discipline to not rush into certain different things.
Yeah.
Um, and then I think of um, is it Satya Nadella, the CEO of Microsoft,
Yeah.
is a very charismatic but yet down to earth leader, asks lots of questions. You know, those are big name CEOs that I
Sure.
think would be great. Those are the top two I think that pop up for me.
And anybody that's a good leader or a good business mind has to balance their life. All of the things they do, family, taking
Mhm.
care of your soul. How do you do that? What's your motivation every day?
So I think my motivation every day is to just get a little bit better.
Yeah.
But about 6 years ago, actually it was over 6 years ago now, so 6 years, 3 months, let's say, I really stepped into living a Buddhist uh, lifestyle or Buddhist ethic, following the five precepts. And at the time, I did, as part of my practice, I stopped eating meat, I stopped drinking. I eat meat again after 5 years of that, but I really try to follow those Buddhist precepts and I try to live a conscious life as best I can. So,
Um, no, go ahead.
let's say, so like right before COVID,
Yeah.
I was on my second silent meditation retreat at the Insight Meditation Society, right? So I've had that as a practice, and then on the fun on the fun side, I picked up ukulele during COVID, then guitar. Now I play bass guitar in a band that does all original music. And so my dining room is now just a music room. And so when I'm not working or with my kids, that's what I'm doing.
You know, when I look at the world of spirituality and theology, Buddhism makes the most sense to me. It's almost like you submit to this idea that nature is going to do what it's going to do, and we have to find a level of adaptability in our intellect and emotional quotient.
Yeah, so the thing that couple things that drew me to it, right? Like the only known thing is that change is change is the inevitable, right? Like,
Yeah,
and we're all gonna die.
yeah,
Um, but I loved what the historical Buddha said, which is like, hey, this is what worked for me. Try it, but see for yourself.
yeah.
And so I was raised Roman Catholic, being from New England,
Oh yeah.
and it's just very different.
Oh, totally.
And so, you know, I joke around with people like I'm not a good caged animal.
Yeah,
And so I found freedom in understanding uh that thought process, that ethic. I don't look at it as a religion, I look at it as a spiritual practice.
yeah,
And it works for me. And it's easy to align with like Jedi and Star Wars, and I was able to teach that to my son. And so
totally.
like, yeah, so we can, it's easier,
Yeah.
and it gives us some language.
It reminds me of the thought process of Joseph Campbell, which is so comforting.
Mm.
It's not this Catholicism, fire, brimstone. If you do this wrong, you're burning for eternity. There's a level of it that's more logical, more benevolent, which is the idea of spirituality and a God is benevolence.
Yeah, well, I think that, you know, I have tons and tons of friends in the Christian community, but like the big part for me is that it's, you know, there's no leap of faith necessary
Right.
to do it. Now, you can, but there's these great stories, right? Joseph Goldstein is one of the pioneering Western Buddhists,
Yeah.
right? So in the late 60s, early 70s, he goes to India, he goes to Burma, he studies under all these people. And one of his teachers tells him that she like levitated up to the wit like did all this stuff. And the way that he tells the story, he tells it and he's like, I have no reason to believe that she was lying to me.
Right.
But it's not a it happened. It's like here's what I was told. And so it's almost like a choose your own adventure, but
That's
use these
right.
practices. And so again, for me, it's this idea of bad in a box,
Yeah.
really good when I can swim everywhere.
Yeah, well said. Well said. So let's say you walk into a room of
Mm,
all of the people that have been clients or have known you in some level of business,
hmm.
and you can walk up to a podium, swim through those people in the room,
Yeah.
and tell them one fun thing about you that would humanize you that maybe they didn't realize. What's your fun story or fun fact you're going to give them?
Hmm. I mean, where to begin, right? But I think that I think it would go to um how like how much of a fanboy I am for some bands
Yeah,
to the point of, I I went to a festival a couple years ago where Mumford and Sons was going to be. And I posted up in front of the stage that they were going to be on for the whole day, did not leave at all, right? Just so that I could make eye contact with Marcus Mumford. And and like I don't fanboy over anything, but Marcus Mumford, Mumford and Sons, um, Wesley Schultz from the Lumineers, those dudes,
yeah,
their music came to me at a point of transition really in my career as I was getting divorced, and it is just part of my being. And
yeah.
so, you know, I would go high five Marcus Mumford before I'd go high five almost anybody.
So we got that out there in the world now. So
That's
let
right.
me.
And I'm
It's
going to
out
see
there.
him. I'm going to see him, and I'm going to see Mumford and Sons in 2 weeks in a very small venue in Brooklyn. And so I'm
Wow,
very excited.
that's awesome. There was a film at one point on Netflix about them doing a tour on a train.
Yeah, the
That was
road
cool.
show.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that
Yeah,
was
I just
totally cool.
like I play music like theirs, I write music like theirs. And I think that that's actually the funny story that a lot of clients know, but I still don't think they grasp that like I go from teaching them communication and sales stuff to playing a bass guitar or an acoustic guitar, singing my face off
Yeah,
with a group of dudes.
yeah, that's awesome. So of everything that you've done, everything you've seen and evolved into, what are you the proudest of?
Hmm. So I think there's two things. The first is commanding Delta 1504. I was a non-ranger qualified infantry officer, which is not normal. And I got by name requested to go to the 82nd after my tour in Afghanistan. And I got to command that company. And that was my professional goal, right? Like if you were like, Chris, what did you want to be when you like that? Everything else has been extra,
Yeah,
right? Second thing is, picking a date to walk away from a very healthy salary to go out on my own with my three business partners and have nobody else to rely on for income other than us. And it's something that I know my old man had wanted to do, and he just never was able to do it. And so
yeah,
the fact that I've been able to do it, um, I find just really, really cool.
yeah. So at the end of the day, everyone has a perception of you. Family, friends, clients, colleagues,
Yeah.
everyone that knows you, but you run the show. What's your perception of you? Who do you think you are?
Um, I think that I am so I think I'm a cross between Ted Lasso and Roy Kent,
Yeah,
right? I have aspirations to be as positive and loving as Ted, and I have some of the gruffness of Roy, but deep down, Roy's a big teddy bear,
yeah,
and I think that's what I am. But professionally, I can come off like Roy sometimes because that's what people need,
yeah,
and I can show up for my kids just like Ted.
yeah.
And so for me, that's like the easiest way to describe myself.
That's great. That is a great way of putting it out there. So if anyone wants to hire you, they want to reach out, they got questions, any of the good business, where do they go?
So LinkedIn, Chris Duprey, bald beard, or you can go to questionfirstgroup.com and get in touch with us there.
Perfect. Chris, this has been wonderful, man. Thank you. It's great to meet you. Thank you for your story. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Joe.
Thank you.
Hello, friends. Joe Dimino here. I just wanted to let you know that after 30 years or so, I have finally released my first book of poetry through the mighty Spartan Press here in Kansas City, Missouri. As the creator and host of both Neon Jazz Radio and the Famous Interviews with Joe Dimino podcast, along with being a visual artist, I'm ready to embark on a new adventure and want you to be a part of it. You can get a copy online via Barnes & Noble, Amazon, and actually on the streets in Kansas City at the great Prospero's bookstore off 39th Street. You can also visit joedimino.com for links to the book, to more poetry, and everything in my world, including paintings. Thanks for all of the love and support over the years, and please dig the words.